Yeah, so we're going to do a series of 7 talks on the 5 Buddha families, which are also called the wisdom energies. The first talk today is going to be an overview of the 5 Buddha families. And then there will be 5 talks, each talk on a specific family or energy. And then a final talk to wrap it up and bring it back together and talk about how do we work with these energies. How do we use these as methods or um, doorways into our path and process of awakening? And so most people are familiar with the Myers-Briggs test. And I took the Myers-Briggs when I was 18 to figure out who my dorm roommate was going to be. So at Appalachian State University, they had all of us freshmen take this personality test, and then they had some system to figure out who would be a good roommate for us based off of these personality types. And I remember specifically after doing the test and getting my results, which I'm an ENFP, which means extroverted, intuitive, feeler, and perceiver, though I was right on the cusp of extroverted. And I would actually typically consider myself to be an introvert, but right in the edge there. But when I got the results from that, I remember having an aha moment. And the aha moment for me was, oh, people are different. There's not some like sort of best type of person. There's actually all different kinds of people. And there are strengths that other people will have that I just won't have. And there's strengths that I have that other people won't have. And that's all okay. And so that was a sort of an aha moment for me. And I think everybody here is familiar with a variety of different types of personality systems, such as Carl Jung's personality types, the Enneagram, Holland's 6 personality types, which is often used for career counseling and helping people find careers that are in alignment with their personalities. The DSM, the Big 5 personality traits, the astrological system, and the 7 chakras. And there are many more. But all of these are pointing to different aspects of who we are as people. Now, the 5 Buddha families, this system, what some of the things I really like about it are that it does come from Buddhism, and it is very much in alignment with our Buddhist practice. And it talks about different layers that a lot of these other personality systems don't talk about. And it's less of a personality psychological thing and more of an energetic based system. Though, of course, the personality comes into play with it. So when we talk about the wisdom energies, we're talking about this word energy, which can be tricky. There's a sort of new agey use of the word energy that can become sort of cliche and lose its power. And I really try to avoid using the word energy in that way. And energy in itself is not something that even scientists even understand to this day. I did some research recently or some research online and found that scientists still have a difficult time explaining what energy is. And so often the best that we can describe it as is these sensational experiences that we feel that are different. So one energy can feel a little different from another energy. Sometimes the energy can be stronger in our bodies than other times. And sometimes people talk about how they can feel energies outside of themselves. They can feel other people's energies. They can feel energies of, when you go to Hawaii and you're standing in these areas with all kinds of volcanic activity. And also when people talk about vortexes, like in Sedona or in Mount Shasta City and Mount Shasta in California, people talk about being able to feel energies there. So anyway, another way to think about these energies are states of being. So a state that we can feel in a given moment, that we feel with our internal sensing abilities, our tracking system, our mental tracking system that can come in contact, and how we bring awareness into the body and feel a certain state. So I just ask, in this moment, let's just check in. Let's check in for a moment. What is the energetic state of your body right now? And it might be different in different places of the body. So check in with the belly, check in with the heart. Notice what's happening in the head, the arms, the legs, the feet, the back, inside the pelvic area. So of the folks that are sitting here, some of you online, some of folks here in person, one person might be feeling kind of energetic and they can't wait for this Dharma talk to be over so they can get outside and do some gardening, or somebody else sitting right beside them might feel very calm and very settled. They might even have a hard time focusing on what's being said because their mind or their body might feel so incredibly spacious. Someone else might be feeling connected to me or to others in the room, while others might feel very clear. Every word that I'm saying, every sound that's happening, every feeling that's happening has a sharp, not a painfully sharp, but a beautifully sharp experience to it. So these are all examples of different types of energies that we might be feeling in any given moment. And this is a prelude into these Buddha families. So these categorical systems helps us identify these foundational energies, and this, in this Buddhist sense. So sometimes you hear the phrase Buddhist psychology. So in Zen, from my experience, my perception, I would say there's not much of a Buddhist psychology that is accessible to us from the tradition of Zen. But in Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, Bhutanese, Nepalese, northern India, this Vajrayana and Mahayana Buddhism that comes from Tibet, has loads and loads of psychology to it. There's volumes, and I heard something like the Dalai Lama has multiple PhDs in Buddhism, and it's not just the philosophical aspect of understanding emptiness, it's also the psychological components of understanding the emotional content, the mental content, the psychological content, and how that relates to Buddhist training and the path of awakening and enlightenment. And so I came in contact with with this system of the Buddha families while I was at Naropa University, which was, of course, started by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a monk who came from Tibet, and developed an integrated program of Buddhist training called the Shambhala. And in that system, he took the Buddha families and created a way that Westerners could relate and actually practice and get in touch with these energies as lay practitioners, as mostly lay practitioners. without having to spend years in caves or in monasteries to over time get in touch with these energies. And so on the Naropa campus in downtown Boulder, on the Arapahoe campus, there is a building that has 5 rooms in it. And each room is a different color. It has different shapes of windows in it. And then the same type of building is recreated up at the Shambhala Mountain Center north of Fort Collins. And so there's multiple buildings up there that have the 5 rooms in it. And in these rooms, in my program in graduate school, we would go into the rooms for 45 minutes at a time and get into a physical posture, like kneeling on our knees and elbows with our hands like this in the Buddha room, and sit in that position for 45 minutes without moving. And in the Buddha room, which is white and has a big round opening in the top, as if it's a crown chakra opening, you sit in this position that both induces a neurotic aspect of that energy and a wisdom aspect of that energy. And depending on the person, they might completely sink into the wisdom aspect while they're in there for 45 minutes, and someone else might completely experience the neurotic aspect. And I'm going to get more into these 2 sides of the coin here in a moment. But we did that twice a day. So you would do the same energy, the same room twice a day for a week, or for like 3 or 4 days in a row or something, like, to really get that energy, to really understand that energy and feel it inside your body. And actually Shunryu Suzuki was part of this process. He and Trungpa Rinpoche were just figuring out how they wanted to bring the Buddha family and the wisdom energies and make it accessible. And then unfortunately, Suzuki Roshi died before they were actually able to begin the process of putting it into form. But there was some Zen influence in this process. These energies are not owned by Buddhism. I just want to make that very clear. These energies I haven't been around since the beginning of time, this body, this system right here. So I can't say, but I imagine that these energies have always been there, and are part of just the energetic system of the universe. But this specific system, the 5 Buddha families, was created, I think, by the Tibetan practitioners, though they got a lot of this information came from India when it all, and from the esoteric practitioners, the siddhis, the sadhus, the mystics. So anyway, so each of these energies manifests as neurosis and manifests as wisdom. Ultimately, their natural functioning is the wisdom aspect. And I'll get to the secret, to what's called the secret mandala in a bit. But as it comes through the human system, which is psychologically impacted by genetics and conditioning from our childhood, and other factors, social conditioning, cultural conditioning, impacts of war. If you grow up during a time of war, that will impact a human system. It will impact the nervous system. So as these natural energies come through the human system, it's kind of like light going through a distorted prism, and that energy kind of getting diffracted or fragmented. Yes, fragmented. Thank you. And getting fragmented. And so this what is a natural energy that comes through us can turn into this hurtful, painful struggle and suffering. So in this process of becoming more and more aware of these Buddha energies, these Buddha families, noticing how it feels in our body, noticing how it manifests in the world, it's a system of how we can become so much more aware of what in our actions, what in our feelings, what in our thoughts are actually neurotic and what is wisdom. And sometimes they're very close, and often they're functioning both at the same time. One as ego, the other as prajna, the other as the natural functioning of universal energies. So often, we talk about the Great Heart Way here at Great Mountain Zen Center a lot, and people say, "Well, like, how do I get in touch? How do I get in touch with that stuff that's down there?" Therapy is an option. Just noticing how we function in the world and where we're getting feedback from the world. But another way to get in touch with these things that we work on in the Great Heart practice is using these Buddha families, using these Buddha energies, and the system that I'm going to help everyone understand a little more as reflective sources to be able to look at ourselves. So many of you are familiar with the Enneagram. And so you might say, I'm not that familiar with it, but there's one of them is called the reformer. So the reformer is someone who likes to reform the world. They care very much about social justice, environmental justice, and helping and fixing and doing good stuff in the world. A neurotic version of that would be this over-attachment to it. Like you can't sleep at night. There's this anxiety that just won't let you go, and everybody's bad who's not recycling, and and so that would be the neurotic version of that. The wisdom version would be this compassionate, loving, caring, understanding reformer who has a lot of accommodation for those who don't understand, for those who are in a place of ignorance around environmental and social justice issues. Yet they're still going out every day, or listening to their bodies, because maybe their body says today's not the day, today's a rest day. But in general, they're manifesting wisdom as going into the world and doing what they can, and not necessarily being attached to the outcomes, wanting outcomes, but not being attached to them, showing up in a certain way, or manifesting in a certain way. So that's an example of how we can work with these energies, or an example of how the neurotic and the wisdom aspects can show up. So in the Buddhist, in the Vajrayana system, we have these flags, the yellow, green, red, white, and blue. And so I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the Tibetan prayer flags. So these are the colors of the Buddha families. So white is what we call the Buddha family, or the Buddha energy. Blue is the Vajra. Red is the Padma. Green, Karma. And yellow, Ratna. And it was really, really wonderful for me when I started learning about the Buddha families, because I was like, okay, I can actually do something useful with the Tibetan prayer flags rather than just kind of use them as an ornament, or as some sort of invocation of a reminder for me. There's actually more meaning, or I can allocate meaning to these colors in the prayer flags. And so in a moment here, I'm going to get into each of these colors and the energies and how they're different. But I do want to say, as we're going through this, what I would encourage you all to do is listen to what sounds familiar to you. So each of us in this system, and if you look at any of the personality systems, each of us typically has 2 to 3 primary energies that manifest more naturally and more readily for each of us. And then we have the ones that are more subtle or even dormant or blocked. So as we're going through these, see which ones kind of really resonate for you. And over these 7 talks, we'll get more and more into this, and hopefully this will be a process of each of us learning more and more about ourselves. And then I'll say that as I go through these, you'll see that each of these there's a name to it, like Ratna. There's an element. So, one of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. There's a primary wisdom type, such as equanimity or spaciousness. There's a poison, so greed, anger, ignorance, jealousy, those things. There's a seed syllable, which I won't get into. There's a Buddha, which I won't get into today, a Bodhisattva, which I won't get into today. I'll get into that when we go into more detail. Even a time of day, a career or lifestyle type, and a variety of other information that can go along with each of these. Also, I will say that whenever you hear a person give a talk on these, I've listened to many talks on these and also read a few different books on these and read articles, and they can all be described in slightly or even largely different ways. And often the person is speaking from their experience of that energy, which is what I will be doing today. I'll be speaking from my experience of the energy and then also adding in information that I've read and learned from other people, just to try to make it so it's not just my subjective experience. And one of the books out there that's most common is The 5 Wisdom Energies by Irene Rockwell. And so this is one of the references that I've been using. And as we go further into this process of these talks, I'll send it out in the newsletter, but I'll send some links to some books and some readings and also some movies that will be in alignment with the talk for each week. So that if folks want to get in touch with that energy for that week, there's ways to do that. And we did that in my program in graduate school. They had us watch movies and do different and read certain articles and read certain things, poems that got us in touch with that energy. Actually, one more thing about origin is Bernie Glassman actually has a structured version of this as well. And what had happened is when Trungpa passed away, Bernie Glassman inherited a number of Trungpa students, and they all showed up with these Buddha family teachings. And Bernie was like, "Oh, this is great." I wasn't there, of course, but this is what I'm imagining. Oh, this is great because we don't have this in Zen. So let's bring this in. Let's use this. Let's use this psychological way to help us do deeper work, psychological work. All right. So Buddha energy. The Buddha energy is white, and the element is space. So right now in this moment, just imagine floating out in space. If you can imagine the vastness of the universe and how small all the little planets and stars are within that vast space. It's boundless, it's endless. The wisdom aspect of this is that there's no drama. It's patient. There's no edges. There's nothing to hook to or be hooked by. It's easygoing. So a person who largely manifests the wisdom of Buddha energy is a very peaceful, calm, welcoming, accommodating, spacious, non-judgmental person who sometimes it can be difficult to connect with them because there's nothing to hook to. But when you're around these people, you walk away feeling at peace. And so a lot of times this is the energy that is most often revered in spiritual communities and spiritual groups, especially, when you go do, I think it's called darshan, with gurus in India, and you absorb the energy from the guru or from the ashram. It's often this energy, this fundamental, which Buddha energy is the fundamental in this system. It's called the fundamental energy, which is this universal space. And it's often a lot of times what people are coming it's what they want when they come to Zen practice. You just want this deep, deep peace, spacious peace. And nothing can disturb it. Now, in the neurotic aspect, we flip this coin, and that spaciousness can become spaced out. So think of a stoner, someone stoned on marijuana. Yeah, man, it's all good. Oh yeah, it just totally stubbed my toe, but it's all good, man. We're all good here. Yeah. There's actually a character that Brad Pitt plays in the movie True Romance that really exemplifies this. And he's a stoner. He plays a stoner character. Um, a person in this neurotic aspect can be insensitive and just not be aware of how they're affecting others. So like Mr. Magoo, I'm just walking around creating all kinds of problems without any awareness of it because everything's all good. There's no problems. So ignorance is the poison here. Ignoring the obvious. There can also be a dullness of awareness, a dull awareness, kind of a heaviness in the head. It can also be lacking energy. So people in severe depression, for example, who can't get out of bed, can be stuck in this neurotic Buddha energy. And there can be a lack of purposelessness or a lack of purpose, a lack of meaning in this neurotic Buddha energy. Before we move, also there's a sort of a personality disorder that can go along with each of these neuroses. So schizoid personality, no emotions, no tears, no feelings, no caring, no connection, just this nothing. So before we leave that energy, I just want to leave us with a positive feel about it. So just imagine a cool evening in the desert lit by moonlight. Not a stir of the wind, but a cool feeling. All right, so now we'll get into Vajra, the blue. The element is water. It's mirror-like wisdom, sharp clarity, cuts through unnecessary extras. It's objective, non-judgmental. It's unattached but aware, and it can be very focused when it needs to be. So Manjushri, in the Buddha hall, and traditionally in Zen Buddha, in the meditation halls, there's not a Buddha on the statue. It's actually traditionally Manjushri. And it's that clarity, that concentrating, that ability to focus one's mind in meditation, focusing on the koan, focusing on the breath. Now, Buddha energy would be more like the samadhi, sinking into the samadhi, and often samadhi is connected with Buddha energy, where here we're talking about concentration, and it's a focused samadhi, like a very clear mirror-like samadhi. where everything is seen, everything is experienced. So it's kind of like when Harada Roshi talks about, or I think Yasutani Roshi talks about, sitting so intensely that there's sweat because you just are experiencing everything so clearly. The neurotic aspect is anger. And often this can show up as annoyance because everybody's stupid. Why can't everybody see what I see? I see everything so clearly. Why can't everybody else see it? It can be critical because you do see everything. You see everything. So you can be so critical of other people and everything that they're doing, and nobody's doing anything right. If they just did it this way, and everything would be fine. So easily annoyed and can get stuck in the details of things and miss the bigger picture, which is the Buddha energy. So an example would be Lisbeth Salander and the girl with the dragon tattoo. If you're familiar with that movie, she's so sharp. And at times the wisdom really comes through in this character, and then other times the neurosis really comes out. She gets very attached to the details, and it's very disturbing for her. And I'll leave you with this. Dogen's writings are very Vajra. They're so clear, so precise, and so in depth. You're not necessarily left with a feeling of warmth or wholeness from reading. You're left with a sense of clarity from reading Dogen's writings, often. Ratna, yellow. The element is earth and earthiness. So the earth is just pregnant with potential, pregnant with and abundant with growth, and it accepts everything. Everything is allowed, everything is involved. It doesn't reject anything. And so the wisdom is equanimity. So often this was confusing for me actually until this week. I spent a lot of time thinking about these things this week. Equanimity I used to think of with Buddha energy. But in Buddha energy, you don't really see details so much. So there's nothing to be equanimous about. Equal means that there's multiple things that we're being equal about. In Buddha energy, in Buddha, there's no separation. But here, there's good and bad things. There's evil and good, and there's things that grow and and diseases and all of this. And so in our lives, we have difficult coworkers and we have wonderful meals, and there's all this delicious, wonderful thing in life. And then there's all these painful and uncomfortable things in life. And that equanimity, Ratna just loves it all. Bring it. Zorba the Greek. I'm sure some of you out there are familiar with Zorba the Greek. Great movie. And Zorba the Greek, he manifests both energies. I mean, a Turkish cigarette. What could be better in this moment than a Turkish cigarette? So good. But it can also be sensational and getting sucked into the sensations and becoming attached to sensation and experience. So where Buddha energy is space, Ratna is clarity, or Vajra is clarity, Ratna is fullness, and just feeling everything and experiential. The neurotic side can be pride. Because you're so full, you feel a full ego. The ego can be very big. And there can be an aspect of the wisdom side that is big and encompassing. But there can also be an aspect of the neurotic side that is big, It's actually the self that's expanded. So here you can have narcissistic personality. Or histrionic personality, people who need to be on stage and be seen and be seen and validated as being special and big. It can also be the Scrooge and hoarding. So part of Ratna energy is collecting, accumulating knowledge, the abundance, just enjoying the abundance. And it can also be a gluttony and just never getting enough. This is the neurotic side, never getting enough. The hungry ghost typically goes along with this energy, chasing accomplishments and accumulating accomplishments, but it never being enough to satisfy the insecurity that may lie underneath. Kazon, the Zen master Kazon. So Dogen brought Soto from China to Japan. 2 generations later, Kazon made it available. He broadened it. He added lay practice. He added ritual. He made it a very full practice that is actually how people continue to practice Zen in Japan today. Is actually more from Kazon than it is from Dogen. I also think of the Ewoks and Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Amma, the hugging saint. Padma, red. So here we have the element of fire. And here we have compassion, bonding, the joy of bonding. Now, a Ratna loves everybody and loves group and community. And Ratna or Padma is really more about interpersonal and really wanting to love and connect and be romantic and encourage and feel one another and merge with one another, with another being. And often this is interpersonal. When it's like when we're relating to things, that might be more Ratna. When we're relating to living beings, that can be more Padma. It can be both, but especially on the human realm, human to human, can be very Padma. But I was talking with my partner last night, and we sort of felt like too that the animal or the dog realm, the dogs are very Padma as an animal species. Very loving, just want to get right up in your armpits and snuggle right up in there and lick your face and give you their belly. So a lot of vulnerability in Padma and passion, that feeling of passion of something. So you can have that passionate love of an activity or your house. The neurotic aspect can be greed, is wanting more. The pain of Padma can be hurt and abandonment and feeling hurt from a breakup and having that deep feeling of hurt from childhood wounding. That can lead to codependence or dependent personality disorders or codependent relationships, or fear of abandonment and borderline personality disorders. And there can be a lot of interpersonal drama. She said this and he said that and they said this and can you believe that? And just a lot of entanglement with other, enmeshment, emotional enmeshment with other. I leave you with these 2 images. Dorothy from Wizard of Oz and Barbara Streisand from Meet the Fockers. I love her character. And I love her character because Padma is something that's weak in me. It's one of my more subtle or even dormant energies. And so I've been working on that personally in my life, which I'll get to that more in a little bit. But yeah, I love her character in that movie. She's a sex therapist, in case you're not familiar with the movie, and she's just Barbara Streisand in general. She's just this warm, loving, romantic character, in lots of movies. And then finally, karma, green. And the element is air, but also where it relates to air is wind. So wind moves things around. It takes seeds to places. It keeps things growing. And it's action. The wisdom is action. Karma is action. And it means that you have energy, abundant energy. And people who are really strong in karma energy seem like they just have this bottomless source of energy. They just do and do and do and do and never seem tired from it. And they're productive and they accomplish lots of things, but they don't necessarily care about the accomplishments themselves. That would be Ratna energy. They just end up doing lots of things. So I think of, like Joan Halifax has I don't want to diagnose her, but I see a lot of karma energy in her. She's running a Zen center. She's got all these students. She's writing books. She's off in Nepal doing humanitarian work. She's over here doing a talk in New York, and then she's over here doing a talk, and just endless energy, it seems. And she's like 70 something and still doing it. So I think of also Mother Teresa, a lot of karma energy. Just this endless energy to just go into a place like Calcutta and give and serve and serve and serve. Dick Van Dyke in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Luke Skywalker, lots of energy. The neurotic side of this is jealousy, seeing other people doing and wanting to do what they're doing. And you can't stop. People become very busy and they can't slow down. They don't know how to slow down. ADHD, OCD, anxiety, this anxiety that drives people, that keeps them going. So each of these, if you haven't figured this out, each of these can have another energy that can balance it. So Buddha energy balances all of them. That space brings space into all the neuroses. This is why we meditate. This is why we're drawn to meditate. To touch that Buddha energy, that spaciousness. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. I want to at least have some time for a couple questions. So I'll finish up with maybe 5 more minutes of information, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. So when I have worked with voice dialogue as a client in the past and as a therapist, clients that I work with, and my experience is at the end of working with voice dialogue, when I've let this part of myself talk and let this part of myself talk and let this part of myself talk, and everybody have an opportunity to talk and say their piece, I always have this feeling of wholeness afterwards. And this is the same thing that happens when we get in touch with our energies and we learn how to transform the neurotic aspect of energy, because it's not just like getting rid of it. It's not repressing it, suppressing it, or stopping it, or killing it. It's actually transforming it through feeling it, through being with it, and through looking at whatever the deeper psychological core beliefs are that we lodged at some point in our life that's blocking the energies. So when these energies naturally flow without hindrance from the wisdom as wisdom, there's a sense of wholeness that we feel. So you might have realized that maybe you're a Padma karma. You like to love, and you like to love a lot of people. And you like to do lots of loving things. And you're sending birthday cards, and you're, buying presents for people, and, and it's just, in that, if we see the neurotic aspect of that, we're not trying to turn that off like a faucet. We're actually becoming very curious about it and leaning into it and energetically allowing ourselves to feel the tightness that comes up with the neurotic aspect, because it's always a tightness. There's always some kind of tightness that's happening, a fear. It's often related to a fear or shame or guilt or some kind of painful feeling like that. And we feel that, and then we find and then the Buddha energy comes in as we give space to that feeling. And then it finds its balance. When it's balanced and Padma is functioning naturally, then there's room for the other energies to show up as well. And then we start to feel this wholeness. Because if we're just functioning out of one or two, in that way we can show up and we can seem, and things can go very well for us in that way. But then other aspects of our life might not be going very well. So for example, if someone is Buddha Vajra, so they're spacious and they're clear, but they're lacking Padma, they're going to get, which is warmth, then they're going to get feedback from the world that they're insensitive, that they don't seem to be very empathic, because it's empathy. It's the Padmas where we find empathy. So you can have gurus out there that are very spacious, and that's a great offering that they have, but it's not a whole offering. And so, I don't know if I've ever met anybody who's like this perfect balanced whole, like with all the energies. I don't know. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't, but I have felt that at times in myself, where it seems like, oh, it seems so whole and all of those energies are at play, but then I sort of like go back into my strengths. There's also 3 levels of the mandala. And so this is true. This is a Vajrayana teaching. There's the outer, the inner, and the secret. The outer mandala is the functioning in the world. So with each of these energies, we can look at how we function in the world and look at the feedback we're getting from the world to see where we're out of balance and to see what our strengths are as well. The inner world is our emotional and psychological content. So our thoughts, our patterns of thinking, our patterns of relating to the outer world, and our emotional content and our emotions, our wounds, and all of that. And so when we feel, and when we bring that tracking, that aware, and we track our internal experiences, that's when we use the energies in the Buddha families to become more aware of what's in balance and out of balance internally, and what's flowing and what's blocked. Then there's the secret mandala. Now, I'm not an expert on Tibetan Buddhism by any means. I've had some teachings on this stuff, but my understanding of the secret mandala right now is that the secret mandala doesn't have a neurotic aspect. The secret mandala is the subtle energies that are these universal energies that are not limited to each of us as individuals. So the inner and the inner and the outer are the aspects of the mandala that are each of our own personal, unique expressions and experiences of these energies. And then the secret mandala is the aspect that's universal, that came way before Buddhism, that's always been around, and that's that subtle energy